What's up, guys? I am True Crime, and today we will continue the tragic but intriguing story of Madeleine McCann. So if you haven't watched it, go back and do it right now. Welcome back to my channel. The police left with boxes of the McCann's clothes, cuddle cat, a pair of latex gloves, suitcases, a notepad, 2 diaries, including one that Kate had started after the disappearance, and a friend's Bible she had borrowed. A passage the Bible's owner had marked from 2 Samuel about the death of a child was copied into the police case file along with a Portuguese translation. The items were taken to another location, where Eddie alerted his handler to one of the boxes of clothes. A source close to the McCann's lawyers told reporters that, if there was indeed a smell of corpses on Kate's clothes, it could have been caused by her contact with corpses as a family doctor. The police removed the Renault, and on the 6th of August, Keila and Eddie were taken to an underground car park opposite the PJ headquarters in Portimão, where 10 cars were parked, 20 to 30 feet apart, including the McCanns and Murads. Eddie, the cadaver dog, gave an alert outside the McCann's car by the driver's door. The next morning, Keila alerted to the rear driver's side inside the boot, trunk in North American English, and the map compartment in the driver's door, which contained the ignition key and key ring. When the key ring was hidden underneath sand in a fire bucket, she alerted again, as she did when the bucket was moved to a different floor of the car park. Almost immediately, the Portuguese press began running stories that Madeleine had died inside apartment 5A. British DNA analysis, hair and other fibers were collected from areas in the car and apartment 5A where Keila and Eddie had given. The next morning, Keila alerted to the rear driver's side inside the boot, trunk in North American English, and the map compartment in the driver's door, which contained the ignition key and key ring. When the key ring was hidden underneath sand in a fire bucket, she alerted again, as she did when the bucket was moved to a different floor of the car P and were sent to the Forensic Science Service in Birmingham for DNA profiling, arriving around 8 August 2007. At this point, according to the Sunday Times, the PJ abandoned the abduction theory. On the 8th of August, without waiting for the results from Birmingham, Portuguese police called the McCanns to a meeting in Portimão, where Guilhermino Encarnação, PJ Regional Director, and Luís Neves, coordinator of the Direção Central de Combate ao Banditismo in Lisbon, told them the case was now a murder inquiry. When Encarnação died of stomach cancer in 2010, the Daily Telegraph identified him as a major source of the leaks against the McCanns. Both the McCanns were interrogated that day. The officers suggested that Kate's memory was faulty. The FSS used a technique known as low copy number testing. Used when only a few cells are available, the test is controversial because it is vulnerable to contamination and misinterpretation. On the 3rd of September, John Lowe of the FSS emailed Detective Superintendent Stuart Pryor of the Leicestershire Police, the liaison officer between the British and Portuguese authorities. Lowe told Pryor that a sample from the car boot contained 15 out of 19 of Madeleine's DNA components, and that the result was too complex for meaningful interpretation. A complex LCN, or low copy number DNA result, which appeared to have originated from at least 3 people, was obtained from cellular material recovered from the luggage compartment section. Within the DNA profile of Madeleine McCann, there are 20 DNA components represented by 19 peaks on a chart. 3 of these 19 components, 15 are present within the result from this item. There are 37 components in total. There are 37 components because there are at least 3 contributors, but there could be up to 5 contributors. In my opinion, therefore, this result is too complex for meaningful interpretation or inclusion. Cannot answer the question, is the match genuine or is it a chance match? A complex message. McCann's made arguidos. Suspects Lowe's email was translated into Portuguese on 4 September 2007. The next day, according to Kate, the PJ proposed that, if she were to admit that Madeleine had died in an accident in the apartment and that she had hidden the body, she might only serve a 2-year sentence. Her husband would not be charged and would be free to leave. Both parents were given arguido status on 7 September and were advised by their lawyer not to answer questions. The PJ told Jerry that Madeleine's DNA had been found in the car boot and behind the sofa in apartment 5A. Jerry did respond to questions, but Kate declined to reply to 48 questions she was asked during an 11-hour interview. The DNA evidence was a 100% match, journalists in Portugal were told. British tabloid headlines included "Corpse in McCann Car," London Evening Standard, 16th October 2007, while the Daily Star reported that a clump of Maddie's hair had been found in the car. The leaks came directly from Portuguese police, according to testimony in 2012, from Jerry Lawton, a Daily Star reporter, to the Levison inquiry. Matt Baggett of the Leicestershire Police told the inquiry that, because the Portuguese were in charge of the case, he had made a decision not to correct reporters. His force's priority, he said, was to maintain a good relationship with the PJ, with a view to finding Madeleine. McCann's returned to the UK, Almeida reports. Despite their arguido status, the McCanns were allowed to leave Portugal, and on legal advice did so immediately, arriving back in England on the 9th of September 2007. The following day, Chief Inspector Tavares de Almeida of the PJ in Portimão signed a 9-page report concluding that Madeleine had died in apartment 5A as a result of an accident, that the restaurant meal and apparent regular checks on the McCann children had been part of the cover-up, that the Tapas 7 had helped to mislead the police, and that the McCanns had concealed the child's body before faking an abduction. An 11-page document from the Information Analysis Brigade in Lisbon analyzed alleged discrepancies in the McCann statements. On 11th September, the public prosecutor, José Cunha de Magalhães y Menezes, handed the 10-volume case file to a judge, Pedro Miguel dos Santos Frias. Menezes applied for the seizure of Kate's diary and Jerry's laptop. The police also wanted to trace telephone calls between the McCanns and the Tapas 7, and there were details in the report about the number of suitcases the McCanns and their friends had taken back to England. On 28 September 2007, according to a leaked diplomatic cable, the United States ambassador to Portugal, Al Hoffman, wrote about a meeting he had had with the British ambassador to Portugal, Alexander Ellis, on 21 September 2007. The cable said,
Hi,
without
I am
delving
an
into the
AI
details,
avatar,
and
and
I
I
wanted
wanted
to tell you
Ellis
that you needed
admitted
that the British
right
police
now.
had developed the
Like
current
and share the
evidence
video
against
so
the
that I
McCann
wouldn't
parents.
take over the world.
And he stressed that
Control
authorities from
risks,
both
a
countries
British
were working
security company,
cooperatively.
paid
He
by an
commented that
anonymous
the media
donor
frenzy
to
was
assist
to be
the
expected
expected
since 7
and was
May
acceptable as
2007
long as
government officials
took
keep
hair
their
samples
comments from the
behind
McCann
closed doors.
twins on 24 September 2007 at their parents' request. The twins had slept through the commotion in apartment 5A after Madeleine was reported missing. Kate wrote that she was concerned the abductor might have given the children sedatives. According to the PJ files, Kate had asked them to take samples 3 months after the disappearance, but they had not done so. Control Risks took a sample from Kate, too, to rebut allegations that she was on medication. No trace of drugs was found. Gonçalo Amaral's removal, later developments. On 2 October 2007, Chief Inspector Gonçalo Amaral was removed from his post as the inquiry's coordinator and transferred to Faro after telling the newspaper Diário de Notícias that British police had only pursued leads helpful to the McCanns. As an example, he criticized their decision to follow up on an anonymous email to Prince Charles that claimed a former Ocean Club employee had taken Madeleine. Amaral was himself made an arguido one day after Madeleine's disappearance in relation to his investigation of another case, the disappearance of Joana Cipriano. The following month, he was charged with making a false statement, and 4 other officers were charged with assault. 8-year-old Joana Cipriano had vanished in 2004 from Figueira, 7 miles, 11 kilometers, from Praia da Luz. Her body was never found, and no murder weapon was identified. Cipriano's mother and uncle were convicted of her murder after confessing, but the mother retracted her confession, saying she had been beaten by police. Amaral was not present when the beating is alleged to have taken place, but he was accused of having covered up for others. The other detectives were acquitted. Amaral was convicted of perjury in May 2009 and received an 18-month suspended sentence. The McCann inquiry was taken over by Paulo Rebelo, Deputy National Director of the PJ, which expanded its team of detectives and began a case review. On 29th of November 2007, 4 members of the Portuguese inquiry, including Francisco Cordereal, Vice President of Portugal's Forensic Crime Service, were briefed at Leicestershire Police Headquarters by the FSS. In April 2008, the top 7 were interviewed in England by the Leicestershire Police, with the PJ in attendance. The PJ planned in December 2007 to hold a reconstruction in Praia da Luz, using the McCann's and top 7 rather than actors, but the top 7 declined to participate. The poor relationship between the McCann's and Portuguese police was evident again that month when, on the day the couple were at the European Parliament to promote a monitoring system for missing children, transcripts of their interviews with the PJ were leaked to Spanish television. The national director of the PJ, Alipio Ribeiro, resigned not long after this, citing media pressure. He had publicly said the police had been hasty in naming the McCanns as suspects. As of May 2008, Portuguese prosecutors were examining several charges against the McCanns, including child abandonment, abduction, homicide, and concealment of a corpse. Inquiry closed 21 July 2008. On 21 July 2008, the Portuguese Attorney General, Fernando José Pinto Monteiro, announced that there was no evidence to link the McCanns or Robert Murat to Madeleine's disappearance. Their arguido status was lifted and the case was closed. On the 4th of August, Portugal's Ministério Público released 17 case files containing 11,233 pages on CD-ROM to the media, including 2,550 pages of sightings. The files included a 58-page prosecutor's report, which concluded, "No element of proof whatsoever was found, which allows us to form any lucid, sensible, serious, and honest conclusion about the circumstances." In 2009, Portugal released a further 2,000 pages. Days after the case closed, excerpts from Kate's diary, which had been taken by the PJ in August 2007, were published in translation by a Portuguese tabloid, Correio da Manhã, despite a Portuguese judge's ruling in June 2008 that the seizure had been a privacy violation and that any copies must be destroyed. On 14 September 2008, a News International tabloid, News of the World, published the extracts, again without permission and now improperly translated back into English. Amaral's book, 24th of July 2008. The lingering tensions between the McCanns and the PJ had reached such a height that Amaral resigned from the force in June 2008 to write a book alleging that Madeleine had died in an accident in the apartment, and that to cover it up, the McCanns had faked an abduction. 3 days after the case closed, Amaral's book, Maddie, A Verdade da Mentira, Maddie, The Truth of the Lie, was published in Portugal by Guerre Paz. By November 2008, it had sold 180,000 copies and had been translated into 6 languages. A documentary based on the book was broadcast on TVI in Portugal and watched by 2.2 million viewers. The McCanns began a libel action against Amaral and his publisher in 2009. Madeleine's fund covered the legal fees. In 2015, they were awarded over 600,000 euros in libel damages. Amaral's appeal against that decision succeeded in 2016. A judge had issued an injunction against further publication or sales of the book in 2009. Still, the Lisbon Court of Appeal overturned the ban in 2010, stating that it violated Amaral's freedom of expression. The ban was reinstated in 2015 as part of the libel ruling, then lifted when Amaral's appeal succeeded in 2016. The McCanns appealed the 2016 decision to Portugal's Supreme Court, but the court ruled against them in February 2017. In their 76-page ruling, the judges wrote that the McCanns had not been cleared by the archiving of the criminal case in 2008. In March 2017, the Supreme Court rejected the McCanns' final appeal. Raising money. The McCanns set up Madeleine's fund, leaving no stone unturned. Limited on 15 May 2007, 12 days after the disappearance. Over 80 million people visited the fund's website 3 months following the disappearance. From September 2007, Brian Kennedy of Everest Windows supported the couple financially, and Kennedy's lawyer joined the fund's board of directors. As of February 2017, the fund had 7 directors, including the McCanns. Appeals by public figures were screened at football matches across the UK. Between May 2007 and March 2008, the fund received £1,846,178, including £1.4 million through the bank, £390,000 online, and £64,000 from merchandise. Donations included £250,000 from the News of the World, £250,000 from Sir Philip Green, $50,000 from Simon Cowell, and $25,000 from Colleen Rooney. J.K. Rowling and Richard Branson also made large donations. Branson donated £100,000 to the McCann's legal fund. Madeleine's fund did not cover the couple's legal costs arising from their status as arguidos. Still, it was criticized in October 2007 for having made two of the McCann's mortgage payments before they were made arguidos. A reward of £2.5 million was also offered, including from the News of the World, Rowling, Branson, Green, and a Scottish businessman, Stephen Wynyard. In March 2008, Express newspapers paid the fund £550,000 and £375,000 in libel damages arising out of articles about the McCanns and the Tapas 7, respectively. In 2011, Kate McCann's book, Madeleine, was serialized by the Sunday Times and the Sun, both owned by News International, for a payment to the fund of £500,000 to £1 million. In December 2015, the fund stood at around £750,000. Private investigators Madeleine's fund hired several firms of private investigators, causing friction with Portuguese police. Shortly after the disappearance, an anonymous benefactor paid for the services of a British security company, Control Risks. There had reportedly been 4 independent sightings from North Africa. Brian Kennedy went to Morocco himself in September 2007 to look into one. A Norwegian woman had reported seeing a girl matching Madeleine's description in a petrol station near Marrakesh, Morocco, on the 9th of May 2007. The child had reportedly asked the man she was with in English, "Can we see Mummy soon?" When the witness returned home to Spain, she learned about the disappearance and telephoned the Spanish police. A month later, according to Kate, the police had still not formally interviewed the woman, which led the McCanns to fear that leads were not being pursued. The McCanns themselves traveled to Morocco on the 10th of June 2007 to raise awareness. They spent the night at the British ambassador's residence and were briefed by consular staff and a metropolitan police attaché. Kennedy hired a Spanish agency, Metodo 3, for 6 months at £50,000 a month, which put 35 investigators on the case in Europe and Morocco. The relationship came to an end in part because the head of the agency made several public statements that concerned the McCanns, including to CBS that, "We know the kidnapper, we know who he is and how he has done it." Another private investigator was David Edgar, a retired detective inspector hired in 2009 on the recommendation of the head of Manchester's Serious Crime Squad. Edgar released an e-fit that August of a woman said to have asked 2 British men in Barcelona, shortly after the disappearance, whether they were there to deliver her new daughter. Other private initiatives included a Portuguese lawyer financing the search of a reservoir near Praia da Luz in February 2008, and the use of ground radar by a South African property developer, Stephen Birch, who said in 2012 that scans showed there were bones beneath the driveway of a house in Praia da Luz. In 2008, Madeleine's fund hired Oakley International, a Washington, D.C. registered detective agency, for over £500,000 for 6 months. Oakley sent a 5-man team to Portugal, led by Henry Exton, a former British police officer who had worked for MI5. The Oakley team engaged in undercover operations within the Ocean Club and among pedophile rings in the Roma community. Exton questioned the significance of the Tanner sighting and focused instead on the sighting by Martin and Mary Smith of a man carrying a child toward the beach. The Oakley team produced e-fits based on the Smith's description. This was a sensitive issue because Martin had recently watched BBC coverage of the McCanns' arrival in the UK from Portugal, at the height of public debate about their alleged involvement. As Jerry exited the aircraft with his son in his arms, Smith believed he recognized him as the man he had seen carrying the child in Praia da Luz. He reported his suspicion to the Leicestershire police, but later came to accept that he was mistaken. At 2,200 witnesses placed Jerry in the tapas restaurant. Nevertheless, the publication of the Smith e-fits, which bore some resemblance to Jerry, would have fed the conspiracy theories about the McCanns. Exton submitted his report to Madeleine's fund in November 2008 and suggested releasing the e-fits, But the fund told Exton that the report and its EFITs had to remain confidential. The relationship between the company and the fund had soured, in part because of a dispute over fees, and in part because the report was critical of the McCanns and their friends. It suggested that Madeleine may have died in an accident after letting herself out of the apartment through its unlocked patio doors. Madeleine's fund passed the EFITs to the police. The PJ and the Leicestershire police had them by October 2009, and Scotland Yard received them when they became involved in August 2011, but did not otherwise release them. Kate did not include them with the other images of suspects in her book, Madeleine, 2011, although she suggested that both the Tanner and Smith sightings were crucial. Scotland Yard released the EFITs in October 2013 for a BBC Crime Watch reconstruction. After it had aired, the Sunday Times published that the McCanns had had the EFITs since 2008. In response, the couple complained that the Sunday Times story implied, which is wrong, that they had not only failed to publish the EFITs, but had withheld them from the police. The newspaper published an apology on an inside page in December 2013. The McCanns subsequently sued and received £55,000 in damages, which Jerry said would be donated to charity. The McCanns met with British Home Secretary Alan Johnson in 2009 to request a review of the case. Johnson commissioned a scoping report from CE Ops Jim Gamble. By March 2010, the Home Office had begun discussions with the Association of Chief Police Officers, ACPO, about setting up a British inquiry. Delivered in May 2010, the Gamble report examined how several British agencies had become involved in the search for Madeleine, including CEOP itself, the Leicestershire Police, the Metropolitan Police Service, SOCA, the NPIA, Crime Stoppers, the Home Office, Foreign Office, and 10 Downing Street. Gamble criticized the lack of coordination. Everyone had wanted to help, and some had wanted to be seen to help, he wrote, which had created a sense of chaos and a sense of competition, hampering the inquiry by causing resentment among the Portuguese police. He recommended renewed cooperation between the British and Portuguese authorities, that all relevant information be exchanged between the police forces, that police perform an analysis of telephone calls made on the night of the disappearance, and that all leads be pursued, including those developed by private detectives. In May 2011, under Home Secretary Theresa May, Scotland Yard launched an investigative review, Operation Grange, with a team of 29 detectives and 8 civilians. The announcement of the review appeared to have been triggered by a News International campaign by way of The Sun. The issue of whether this request was the result of threats or persuasion from News International Chief Executive Rebecca Brooks was one of the issues raised at the Levison inquiry. On the 11th of May 2011, as it was serializing Kate's book, Madeleine, the front page of The Sun, hosted an open letter from the McCanns in which they asked Prime Minister David Cameron to set up a new inquiry. 20,000 people signed the newspaper's petition that day. On the same day, according to her testimony to the Levison inquiry, May spoke by telephone, at her instigation, to Brooks and Dominic Moen, editor of The Sun. What's up, guys? I am True Crime, and this is the end of the video. See you in a week's time. Don't forget to subscribe.